Since 2007, one man has dared to expose the sinister power players on all sides of the phony political spectrum. Armed with over 30 years of research knowledge of the paranormal, government conspiracies, geopolitics, secret and ancient societies, the esoteric arts, and much more. One man's quest for knowledge has become a mission for the enlightenment of all people. Broadcasting from the conspiracy ground zero of Dallas, Texas, this is The Global Reality with your host, Josh Reeves.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to another edition of The Global Reality. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. It is Thursday, November 21st, 2019, and I'm back here with you again for yet another edition of the broadcast. Got a lot of more news and info to get into here tonight that I didn't get into last night, so I'll be doing my best to get into all of that for you here tonight. So welcome and thank you again for tuning in to the broadcast. Thank you to everybody out there that continues to support my work. We discussed our fundraising efforts for the week yesterday, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today, other than to tell you that we still haven't reached our goal for the week, but we made a little bit of headway today. And so now we are at 300 by tomorrow is what we have to have. So we got in 100 total today. If we can get the rest of what we need, 3 people contribute $100 between now and tomorrow and Friday, and we will be good. And then we won't have any goals left until we start getting into the end of the month. So please contribute. Listen, if we can get more than that, like I said yesterday, really, by this time of the month, we need to at least have reached at least half of our goals. So, realistically, if we could get, half of our goal between now and the weekend, that would be an even better thing to happen. But a minimum of the goal, we got to have minimum of 300 by tomorrow. So, 3 people, $100 each. But just please contribute anything you can so we can get off. I've got, I got to keep the lights on. I got to keep the internet on, all that stuff here. You know the drill. I'm watching the weather for tomorrow as well. So your contributions will help that effort. Looking like it might be, the rain may be burning off. So it may be possible that I'm doing a broadcast tomorrow from Dealey Plaza. So your contributions will help go towards me being able to go do that. I got to be able to get down there, get back, all that stuff. Nothing's free, folks. I wish it was. So again, or as far as our fundraising efforts go, by this time of the month, at least by the middle of the month, every month, we need to at least raise half of what our goal is, at least. Or just about half, 45% or something. So that means we're behind now, and your support will enable me to be able to do this. And like I said, that's the biggest detriment and the biggest thing that stands in the way of progress with it, as far as my work is people not contributing. And at some point I'm going to have to not give everything for free away, but there's it's finding the balance between that and finding a way to, it's a tough thing. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. That's the way it is. If you've got JFK related questions that you would like to hear me talk about and address for you during the show tomorrow, you can email me those, globalrealityshow@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to get to your emails. It would be cool to answer some interesting questions while being in the actual place. So we'll see. I think it should be fun. It should be an interesting thing. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. If again, pending we get more support in here between now and then, and pending that the weather cooperates. All right, let's see here. I was going to cover this story, and Wall Street Journal has their articles behind a paywall, and hey, I get it. I mean, but then again, they're mainstream media, but still, you see what's going on in Wall Street Journal. Can't even put out their shit for free anymore. It's an article entitled "When the U.S. Tried to Control Hurricanes." And I was going to read it, but the article's blacked out. But there's enough there for me to tell what they're talking about. And I already know about this information anyway, but I'll talk about it here. What they're discussing is Project Storm Fury. And this is often, well, it's hardly ever referenced except by, conspiracy theorist people and whatnot. But if and when that it's talked about in any sort of mainstream circumstances, generally it's to say that it was failed and all the rest of it. No. See, they openly tested all this stuff. They openly did all this stuff for many, many years. But it wasn't until they started putting it into the tests and all that stuff that was open stuff. But it wasn't until they started putting it into actual usage that it became classified. And that can be said about many other. That's why there was so much of the MK Ultra stuff that we found out about that came out, and people assumed that it ended at a certain point or whatever. It never ended. None of this stuff ever ends. It's just the activity of it and the usage of it becomes classified. Project Storm Fury was an attempt to weaken tropical cyclones by flying aircraft into them and seeding them with silver iodine. Well, even that statement alone right there should tell you a lot about what their actual intent was. You can't use the term, I mean, listen to that. They use the term weaken and seeding in the same sentence. It doesn't take an Einstein to know that if you're seeding something, that's not going to weaken. You're making it stronger. So that's what I believe the whole thing of this was. And then when the technology advanced, then they gained the ability to be able to steer it and then create these. And weather weapons are very real. Weather wars have been going on for decades. Russia was using them against us in the 1980s. Much of the drought, the severe droughts across America that affected crop production during the 1980s. Remember I talked about that Sura, S-U-R-A, the Sura ionospheric heater that was like the precursor to HAARP that Russia had long before we even had HAARP. And they were doing it back then. But it's interesting that I guess they publicly stated that Project Storm Fury was an attempt to weaken tropical cyclones by flying aircraft into them and seeding with silver iodine. We knew even before that you could seed. Cloud seeding means you're making rain. So if you throw in silver iodine in it, it's just going to make it worse. The project was run by the United States government from 1962 to 1983. That's how long they've been modifying the weather, ladies and gentlemen. The hypothesis was that the silver iodine would cause supercooled water in the storm to freeze, disrupting the inner structure of the hurricane, and this led to seeding several Atlantic hurricanes. However, it was later shown this hypothesis was incorrect. Yeah, you think? It'll get worse. That's the real question. That's what they don't admit to. That's what would be interesting to know, is how many of these they, just because they didn't know better at the time. Maybe they did. Maybe that's the bigger secret here. But it would be interesting to know what hurricanes they did this on, because it says Atlantic hurricane. So I guess if you checked, that could be, you could find that out pretty easily. I guess if you went back and you looked at Atlantic hurricanes, specifically ones that caused, death and destruction between the years of 1962 and 1983, looking for especially powerful ones, you could get a pretty good idea of the ones that were seeded with silver iodine and actually made worse. That's interesting. It was determined that most hurricanes do not contain enough supercooled water for cloud seeding to be effective. Additionally, researchers found that unseeded hurricanes often undergo the same structural changes that were expected from seeded hurricanes. This finding called Storm Fury's successes into question, as the changes reported now had a natural explanation. See, there's all kinds of fuckery going on here, you can tell. The last experimental flight was flown in 1971 due to a lack of candidate storms. Although they were going to say a lack of candidates to fly into the storms. Fuck that, I'm not doing it, you go. And a changeover in NOAA's, the National Atmospheric, blah, 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 you know what that is. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Project Storm Fury was officially canceled more than a decade after the last modification experiment. Project Storm Fury failed to reach its goal of reducing the destructiveness of hurricanes, but it was not without merit. See, they didn't even mention that they were using silver iodine to seed clouds on the Ho Chi Minh Trail during Vietnam. That's a fact. The project's observational data and storm life cycle research helped improve meteorologists' ability to forecast the movement and intensity of hurricanes. Cloud seeding was first attempted by Vincent Schaefer and Irving Langmuir. After witnessing the artificial creation of ice crystals, Langmuir became an enthusiastic proponent of weather modification. Schaefer found that when he dumped crushed dry ice into a cloud, precipitation in the form of snow resulted. With regard to hurricanes, it was hypothesized that by seeding the area around the eye wall with silver iodine, latent heat would be released. This would promote the formation of a new eye wall. As this new eye wall was larger than the old eye wall, the winds of the tropical cyclone would be weaker due to a reduced pressure gradient. Even a small reduction in the speed of hurricane winds would be beneficial, since the damage potential of the hurricane increased as the square of the wind speed slightly lowered. Wind speed would have a large reduction in destructiveness. Due to Langmuir's efforts and the research of Schaefer at General Electric, the concept of using cloud seeding to weaken hurricanes gathered momentum. Indeed, Schaefer had caused a major snowstorm on December 20th, 1946 by seeding a cloud. This caused GE to drop out for legal reasons. Oh, that's fucking wild. Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, I'd never heard that before. That's funny because, GE. I mean, come on. What was their slogan? They used to have those commercials. GE, we bring good things to life. My ass. GE, we bring good things to death. That's fucking, I mean, if there was ever a poster child for the military industrial complex, it'd be GE. My God. NBC and all that. That's not just the idea of that. It's funny when you know about the amount of death and destruction GE has caused with their weapons and stuff through the years. And you just can see these guys, this guy, they're interested in cloud seeding, weather modification, right? GE would like to have that on, that feather in their cap. Could be an interesting product to sell to the military, for use as a weapon. We're talking 1946 here. This guy Schaefer does it, causes a major, what they're described here as a major snowstorm by seeding one cloud. And GE said, fuck that. We're out. Nah. Yeah, hey, it's cool. And congrats. Hey, it works, but nah. That's hilarious. It freaked GE out so bad. They pulled out. They fucking jumped ship. Schaefer and Langmuir assisted the U.S. military as advisors for Project Cirrus, the first large study of cloud physics and weather modification. Yeah, Project Cirrus was another one. Project Cirrus was the first attempt to modify a hurricane. It was a collaboration of the General Electric Corporation, the U.S. Army Signal Corps, the Office of Naval Research, and the U.S. Air Force. After several preparations and initial skepticism by government scientists, the first attempt to modify a hurricane began on October 13th, 1947, on a hurricane that was heading west to east and out to sea. The project's two B-17 and B-29 of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Group were dispatched from MacDill, Florida, to intercept the hurricane. The seeding B-17 flew along the rain bands of the hurricane and dropped nearly 180 pounds of crushed dry ice into the clouds. The crew reported pronounced modification of the cloud deck seeded. It is not known if that was due to the seeding. Well, I mean, that's an asinine statement. You drop something in a cloud, you see it change, and then you don't know whether why the change happened was a result of your seeding or not. Come on. Next, the hurricane changed direction and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the seeding, and Irving Lamar claimed that the reversal had been caused by human intervention. Cirrus was canceled and lawsuits were threatened. Only the fact that a system in 1906 had taken a similar path, as well as evidence showing that the storm had already begun to turn when seeding began, into the litigation. This is fascinating. So this is what we're understanding here, what we're learning here, if you didn't already know this, is that this is the reasons why. I've gotten that question a lot, and I don't think I've ever had a real legitimate answer to it other than the standard thing. Well, they don't want the public to freak out, just like they keep anything they keep a secret, just like the justification for keeping extraterrestrials a secret or whatever else. But that's fascinating. So they were afraid of lawsuits. That's what it was. That's the whole reason why they made this technology a secret in the first place, because they proved it worked. They did it openly. They didn't hide it. That's fascinating. Because I would have thought, and kind of, I guess, was under the perception that these projects became declassified at some point. But no, the fact of the matter is, they weren't classified at the time. They were just open about it, and they openly reported it. And then word got out to the public, and people started talking about lawsuits. Yeah, that makes total sense. Because I always wondered that, why did it? I mean, they openly admittedly did it in Vietnam and the rest of it. So I think that the idea that when it was originally conceived, it was to, weather modification. I mean, it was conceived to reduce loss of life, reduce destruction of property, and then they started saying, oh, wait a minute. Not only does this have military applications, but this has applications to be used against civilian populations as well. But if we use it against civilian populations and we do it with intent to be able to create, what I termed many years ago, the disaster economy. Because whenever you have one of these hurricanes, you look, it's always, remember when Katrina happened? And then we all ended up finding out later, the stuff with all the toxic trailers that they sent down there, that was all by Halliburton. When you find out that every time one of these weather disasters happens, the people that get brought in the aftermath are getting no bid contracts to do it. And it's always the same military industrial complex companies that they outsource, like when they go and deliver, air quotes, freedom to a country. They're looking like they need a little freedom over there. We ought to take them some freedom, which is code for invasion and the takeover and everything else. But whether DynCorp and Halliburton and all those, and Kellogg, Brown and Root, then they started to figure out that they could use these things and create storms Because, hey, these guys at the top levels, they're invested in these companies. They're in bed with all these guys. They get lobbies. They get payoffs. We'll cause this. Everybody will think it's natural. And then our people get to go in and make millions of dollars off of it. It's a whole industry. But it's fascinating because I never really knew the moment in which it went from being openly admitted and talked about doing to all of a sudden, then it became, again, we're talking 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. It was specifically here in the 1940s, it was an open thing. It wasn't hidden at all. It wasn't secret, and it wasn't conspiracy theory or science fiction or fantasy. But they effectively, that's incredible. They effectively, over the course of that time, over the course of one generation, got people as a whole to believe that weather modification and having the ability to modify the weather and create storms and make them worse or make them lessened and everything else and steer them, that's a wild, crazy conspiracy theory. And the only reason they would want to do that and change that perception is so they could benefit from it. That's fascinating. It really is fascinating when you get down to the whole nitty-gritty as to why they've kept weather modification a secret and act like it doesn't exist. And then like I talked about a few months ago, we got this video clips where they're acting like Bill Gates invented this stuff. They hadn't been doing it for decades. It's just insane. And now they're saying, we could do this to save the planet from global warming. Yeah, who gets to foot the bill on that? Like they haven't already been doing it for years. The United States Weather Bureau's National Hurricane Research Project, founded in 1955, had as one of its objectives, to investigate the scientific validity of hurricane modification methods. To this end, silver iodine dispensers were tested in Hurricane Daisy in August 1958. The flares were deployed outside of the hurricane eye wall. So this was an equipment test rather than a modification experiment. The equipment malfunctioned in all but one of the flights, and no conclusive data was acquired. The first seeding experiment since the Sirius disaster was attempted on September 16th, 1961, into Hurricane Esther by NHRP in the United States Navy aircraft. 8 cylinders of silver iodine were dropped into Esther's eye wall, and winds were recorded by weakening by 10%. The next day, more seeding flights were made. This time, the silver iodine did not fall into the eye wall, and no reduction in wind speed was observed. These two results were interpreted as making the experiment a success. The seedings of Hurricane Esther led to the establishment of Project Storm Fury in 1962. Project Storm Fury was a joint venture of the United States Department of Commerce and the United States Navy. You see what I'm saying? I talked about that recently on the show. When remember when Snowden was it Snowden that was on Rogan, and he was saying, there's no information about chemtrails or aliens in the CIA database because I looked and it's not there. You remember I talked about that, how he just like the government itself and just like the people that work in these secret groups and everything, they just work forward from the assumption that everybody in the general public are complete tarred dumbasses, and yeah, most of us are. But like I said, those projects generally are handled by the Department of Energy. There's so many of these government organizations that have these names, the Treasury Department, the Department of Energy. I mean, and you hear it here. The seeding of Hurricane Esther led to the establishment of Project Storm Fury in 1962. Storm Fury was a joint venture of the United States Department of Commerce. Okay, well, let's while we're here, let's do this. Let's just read what the definition of the United States Department of Commerce is, shall we? In the United States, the Department of Commerce is an executive department of the federal government concerned with promoting economic growth. It really is a joke, isn't it? Among its tasks are gathering economic and demographic data for businesses and government decision-making and helping to set industrial standards. This organization's main purpose is to create jobs, promote economic growth, encourage sustainable development, and block harmful trade practices of other nations. Wow. Boy, talk about a branch of the federal government that is not doing its job. Jesus, really? That's what they're supposed to be doing? Fuck. The Department of Commerce headquarters is the Herbert Hoover building in Washington, D.C. And Wilbur Ross is the current Commerce Secretary. That's fucking hilarious. Wow. So when you hear somebody, that's interesting. Economic growth, demographic business. What in the flying fuck, ladies and gentlemen, does a governmental organization that's supposed to be concerned with economic matters and demographic data for business, what in the flying fuck are they doing involved in a weather modification experiment in 1962? Got any guesses? The joint venture of the United States Department of Commerce and the United States Navy. Well, again, that's exactly like what I was telling you. The disaster economy. That right there proves what I've been saying for over a decade. Is that when they figured out that they were fucking up, it's interesting. It almost seems like, and I've seen this happen with a few, it almost seems like a lot of the tyranny that we've experienced as things have progressively gotten worse, specifically since like 1947. I talk about all the events of 1947 that happened in the beginning of the first volume of the Spellcasters. And it's interesting that it almost seems like a lot of this stuff, a lot of the secrecy and a lot of the cover-up and all this came as a result of them being open about this, a lot of this stuff in the beginning. And then they realize, no, there's way too many dumbasses out there. We got, and I think they've kind of been working from that standpoint ever since. And it's just gotten to the point where they've kind of taken that attitude, it's kind of a human thing. It's like, you get burned once, you don't want to get burned the same way twice. So even though it may be justified in one instance, but not justified in another, you're going to keep doing that. Interesting. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about right there. So, of course, if the United States Department of Commerce is concerned with economic growth, gathering economic and demographic data, and then you have this thing that I term the disaster economy, yeah, that's going to be a weather modification program is going to be of high interest to the Department of Commerce because this is what actually enabled them to create this disaster economy. Of course, it makes total sense. It's interesting that, and again, just another example of what I've been talking about, how there's, like the department, you wouldn't think, talking about JFK, that's where I think, from what I understand, some of these guys, nobody really knows for sure. Everybody claims they knows for sure, know for sure. Nobody knows 100% all the facts about JFK, like nobody knows 100% the facts about 9/11 or any of this stuff. We probably never will. But supposedly the shooters that were on the grassy knoll on November 22nd, 1963, were a combo of mob guys brought in by Ruby and guys brought in from the Department of Treasury. Because the Department of Treasury, as I've told you many times, employs the world's top sharpshooters. That's such a fascinating thing. It's not the Navy SEALs or the Marines or Special Forces. It's the Department of Treasury. And one of the main things I can't believe they've never made a movie about this because it'd be fascinating because those guys, they take their fiat currency very seriously. I mean, when they find out people are, I don't know how much, I mean, who knows how much of this goes on. I'm sure it goes on even today, but these guys would just send out, I mean, fuck a raid, or, we think of everything now in terms of, they get evidence, there's a raid, people find out there's money, counterfeiting going on or something, they do like a SWAT style raid, whatever. No, man, the Department of Energy will just, I'm sorry, the Department of the Treasury. Well, fuck that. They do it. They're not doing anything like that. They're just going to fucking wait till you come out or wherever and just take your ass out and go clean up, and it's not going to be on the news. These motherfuckers take their fiat currency very seriously. Wow. So that's fascinating. I mean, that just proves so many years of my research and what I'm doing right there. And I never knew that. Project Stormfury was a joint venture of the United States Department of Commerce and the Navy. Wow. That means that they must have believed that with the things they could do with that weather modification technology, they could significantly affect, either in a positive or negative way, the economy of the United States. The next was Project Baton. The objective of Project Baton was the analysis of the life history of thunderstorms. The Department of Defense research activity supported by the Advanced Research Project Agency. Project Baton sought to expand understanding of storm physics as an aid to weather forecasting, fire prevention, and possibly for artificially controlling the weather. Dr. Helmut Weichmann, as an employee of the U.S. Army Signal Research and Development Laboratory, and Dr. Paul McReady of the Meteorology Research Incorporated were joint leaders of the Project Baton team. During the 1962 from July-August storm season in Flagstaff, Arizona, the scientists selected guinea pig storms and seeded them with chemicals. Effects were thoroughly analyzed from the ground and from the air with time-lapse motion picture cameras, stereo still cameras, storm radar, lightning detectors, and airborne heat sensors. Among the agents inserted in the selected clouds were, quote, condensation nuclei, which temporarily increase the number of water droplets in the cloud, and pulverized dry ice, which turns a portion of the cloud to fine snow crystals that remain aloft. The utilization of these agents facilitated study of a storm's characteristics. Project Stormfury begins. Robert Simpson became its first director, serving in this capacity until 1965. There were several guidelines used in selecting which storms to seed. The hurricane had to have a less than 10% chance of approaching inhabited land within a day. It had to be within range of the seeding aircraft, and it had to be a fairly intense storm with a well-formed eye. The primary effects of these criteria was to make it possible. Seeding targets extremely rare. Yeah, I remember watching when Hurricane Katrina happened to me. That was the most blatant. I remember watching it live going, oh my God, they finally did it. Where that thing went up the East Coast, stalled, and then came around back down. It went in the opposite direction. It came back down and went around Florida, cleared Florida. Went around the bottom of Florida and came back up through the Gulf and slammed into New Orleans. That was, boy, I remember watching that going, oh, holy shit, we are in for it now. That was definitely probably the biggest, most effective use of that. I'd be curious to know how much they've used it after that, either for mitigation or for, make them worse. Interesting stuff. Listen to this. It says, Stormfury had been a primary generator of funding for the Hurricane Research Division. While the project was operational, the HRD's budget had been around $4 million. In 2000, the HRD employed 30 people and had a budget of roughly $2.6 million a year. However, knowledge gained during flights proved invaluable in debunking its hypothesis. Other science resulted in a greater understanding of tropical cyclones. In addition, the Lockheed P-3s were perfectly suitable for gathering data on tropical cyclones, allowing improved forecasting. Former Cuban President Fidel Castro alleged that Project Storm Fury was an attempt to weaponize hurricanes. Wow. Wow, fascinating. Now that's really interesting. So yeah, exactly as I described in the beginning. Started out as a public thing. They figured out it worked. They botched the public outcome of it. Claimed it didn't work, but then claimed they also learned how some other things from it, and then made it secret. And old Castro had that shit figured the fuck out. That's fascinating stuff. Really is. This is even more fascinating. NASA just detected water vapor on a moon of Jupiter. Yet another clue that Europa's hidden ocean could hold alien life. Here we go. Here we go. 2010, the year we make contact. If you have never seen that movie, you should watch it. Everybody's seen 2001, but a lot of people didn't see the sequel because a lot of people were told that it sucked. No, it didn't suck. It just went over most people's heads. But it's the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, written by Arthur C. Clarke. And here's what's interesting about Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke, and I don't have him right here in front of me. I didn't prepare that or anything, you know. The science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, what's fascinating, of course, you know, his book was the basis of Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is where it's how they basically did the R&D, the research and development for the technology that would later be employed in the staged moon landing footage, and would also later be used, wouldn't be used again in a film capacity until George Lucas released his original Star Wars in 1977. And it's not conspiracy theory. He's admitted to this. George Lucas and Spielberg are both admitted to his influence. But what's fascinating is that there are many actual scientific discoveries that they accredit to Arthur C. Clarke. Things that at the time didn't exist, that we're told that he wrote about. There's always been something weird and wonky about this to me too. You know, he writes these things as supposedly fiction, and then within a very short amount of time, they become a reality. And they're still working on trying to come up with things that Clarke first envisioned decades ago. Stuff like the space elevator. But to me, the most interesting one is geostationary communication satellites. Clarke contributed to the popularity of the idea that geostationary satellites would be ideal telecommunications relays. He first described this in a letter to the editor of Wireless World in February 1945. He elaborated on the concept in a paper titled Extraterrestrial Relays. Can rocket stations give worldwide radio coverage? Published in Wireless World in October 1945. The geostationary orbit is now sometimes known as the Clarke orbit, or the Clarke belt, in his honor. It is not clear that this article was actually the inspiration for the modern telecommunications satellite. According to John R. Pierce of Bell Labs, who was involved in the Echo satellite and Telstar projects, gave a talk upon the subject in 1954 using ideas that were in the air, but were not aware of Clarke's articles at the time. So this is interesting that This is one of many. There's many things that he said ahead of time and wrote ahead of time that they later used. Now, what is fascinating about that to me is that he did he wrote all these books. And it's interesting when you look at those early science fiction writers from that period that he came out of. And it's pretty clear that they had access to some kind of knowledge beyond what the general public had at the time. And I've said this for many years. I believe that science fiction itself, the creation of science fiction itself, was actually created to, as I've said, fictionalize the truth so the truth seems like fiction. To fictionalize things like extraterrestrials, advanced technology, things like this, so that people always have a reference point to associate that with. And then Hollywood, as I show in the Spellcasters, was used to sell that to the idea to the general public. That way, when they hear about these things as being real, it's very easy for someone to just dismiss that as being, oh, well, you watch too many movies. You watch too much TV. You think that stuff's real because you watch too many movies, you watch too many TV. Well, it's interesting that one of the tenets of the flat earth believers is that they don't believe satellites are real, which I think is absolutely ridiculous because I've fucking seen them myself in the sky. I've seen them since I was a little kid. You can see them. They're up there. But that is an interesting fact that I'm just saying theoretically, if you were going to create, if you had some kind of agenda, again, I don't believe that. I'm just stating that it's interesting that if you were someone for whatever reason was trying to create that falsehood, the fact that it was done by a science fiction writer is all the more interesting. I mean, look, people knew, people even knew when L. Ron Hubbard was starting Scientology, people knew even then he was a science fiction writer. But it's interesting that, and a lot of people don't know this, because they don't know the timeline of when all this stuff happened. People don't understand is that the Xenu stuff got added much later. It got added in the 1970s, and it got added after L. Ron Hubbard got introduced to another CIA assets information, Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin was asked numerous times if he was CIA, and he'd always just smile and laugh and sort of laugh. He would never say, no, I'm absolutely no, I'm not, or if you weren't, you think you would just deny it flat out. Of course, you'd be vehemently denying that. That's why I accuse you of being the CIA. That's something you vehemently deny, right? If you're not in the CIA, you're not going to fuck no, I'm the fucking CIA. No, he would just every time he would never say that he wasn't. But it's a fact that the introduction of the Anunnaki stuff to L. Ron Hubbard is what made him later add the Xenu stuff into. That's why it's why when you go through the levels and they give it to you, it's all like on handwritten shit. It's all handwritten papers, those whole additional levels, because it was just stuff that he came up with later and tagged on much later. Well, after he'd written the science fiction stuff, he wasn't even writing science fiction stuff for a long time. At the point in which he introduced the Xenu stuff into Scientology, and a lot of people don't know that, and they don't talk about that a lot when it comes to these documentaries and stuff. People talking about Scientology, I don't think I've ever seen anybody talk about it, but that's a fact. That Xenu stuff didn't get added until after he was introduced to the Zecharia Sitchin stuff, which again, as I've stated for many years, people always say, oh, well, it's Zachariah Sitchin stuff is crap and this, that, and the other. But he did, that's the whole thing. Those, just because he's a crackpot, I'm trying to explain these people for years, just because he was a crackpot or a CIA agent or whatever else, doesn't mean that's exactly the effect. That's why he was such a classic shill. That's exactly like what they want their agents and shills and disinformation agents to do. They want people to throw the baby out with the bathwater because this guy's a spook and this guy's whatever. Then what he talked about can't be trusted either. And the fact of the matter is, those translations are real. That those texts are real. But they had a disinformation agenda and a science fiction connection to it, so that when people hear about it, they associate it with science fiction. And I believe that since L. Ron was also involved in the CIA, this was a part of the ongoing agenda. The agenda had changed by that point between 47 and in the mid-1970s. So that's when I think you started to see, okay, they knew people were going to start finding out about this Anunnaki stuff, and they had had started to have an interest in what was being hid over there for national security reasons. And this is when you started to see the sort of the melding, the meshing together of those things. Again, it's cognitive dissonance. It can cause confusion, and also to get people to dismiss these things as being fake or not real, and just being, that's a part of the whole plan, folks. So that's what you got to be careful with. That's why I read those back in the day, 8, 9, 10 years ago. That's why I did all those famous readings of the Zachariah Sitchin stuff on my show. I even said at the time when I was doing it, it wasn't because I was a fan of his. I wasn't a fan of his. I never read any of his books before that. But it was to be able to go through those things, read them, and attempt to, for you, the audience, to separate the wheat from the chaff. You can find factual stuff in his work, but it's also peppered with disinfo, and the difficult part is doing your own work and your own due diligence and spending years researching and looking at the scholarly translations and everything else, which I have, and attempting to separate the wheat from the chaff. And what's interesting is that, from what I found on my own, there's very little difference between what Zachariah Sitchin actually put out and what the scholarly translations say. What he added were these things where you could say, okay, his own little thing where, okay, well, yeah, that word could mean this, but it could also mean something else. So in the movie 2010, The Year We Make Contact, if you remember, everybody knows the famous black monolith. I talk about that in my Secret Messages film series. When they're going to try and find the spaceship and all that stuff and repair it and see what went wrong with the HAL computer in the first movie in 2001 and all that. It's interesting because it's like, the United States and Soviet Union are on the brink of war. They've got Russian and American astronauts up there. There's a scene on the park bench in that's fascinating where they put down, it's like Time magazine, and it says like world, the brink of war. It's supposed to be like the United States president and the Russian president. If you pause that on that part and look at that, it's Arthur C. Clarke. It's a photo of Arthur C. Clarke as the American president, and then the Russian president on the other side is Stanley Kubrick. Little Easter egg. They were putting Easter eggs in movies even back then, folks. 1984, whenever that movie came out. Yeah, 84. I remember I watched it when I was a kid, and I was like, what the fuck? Then when I watched it when I was an adult, I was like, oh, shit, I get it now. Aboard I'll just read this little, excuse me, this little synopsis from the film. You should definitely watch it if you haven't seen it, though. After surviving a dangerous braking maneuver around Jupiter's upper atmosphere, The Lenov crew find the abandoned Discovery floating in space. Colonel reactivates the ship, and the Chandra restarts Hal, who had been deactivated by Bowman before he disappeared. And you remember that, at the end of 2001. Also nearby is the giant alien monolith that the Discovery was originally set to investigate. Cosmonaut Max Brzezinski travels to the monolith in an EVA pod, at which point the monolith briefly opens with a burst of energy, sending Max's pod spinning off to space. On Earth, Dave Bowman, now an incorporeal being that exists inside the monolith, this is what I'm telling you, this is some deep shit, appears on his wife's television screen to tell her goodbye, and then visits his terminally ill mother just before she dies. Aboard the Discovery, Chandra discovers the reason for Hal's malfunction. The National Security Council has ordered Hal to conceal from the Discovery's crew the fact that the mission was about the monolith. This conflicted with Hal's basic programming of open, accurate processing of information, causing him to suffer the computer equivalent of a paranoid mental breakdown. Although the order bears his signature, Floyd angrily denies any knowledge of the NSC's actions. Back on Earth, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union escalates to war, and the Americans are ordered to leave the Lenov and move to the Discovery, with communication with each other forbidden except in an emergency. Both crews plan to leave Jupiter separately when a launch window opens in several weeks' time, but Bowman appears to Floyd and says it's paramount that everyone leave within 2 days. And Floyd is played by Roy Scheider from Jaws. And he sees, the guy from 2001, the guy that disappeared. He tells him, you got to get out of here in 2 days. What am I going to do? Go tell this crew? He's like, I got to tell the fucking crew. I just saw a ghost. He told me we got to get the fuck out of here. Floyd returns to the Lenov to confer with Captain Tanya Kirbuck, who remains skeptical. The monolith then suddenly disappears, and a growing black spot appears on Jupiter itself. The spot is actually a vast group of monoliths that are exponentially multiplying. The monoliths begin shrinking Jupiter's volume, increasing the planet's density, and modifying its chemical composition. This convinces the two crews that they must leave soon. Since neither ship could reach Earth with an early departure, they work together using the Discovery as a booster rocket for the Leonov, though it will mean the Discovery and Hal's destruction. Uninformed about the true purpose of the operation, Hal suggests to Chandra to stop the launch and remain to study Jupiter's conversion. When Chandra finally tells Hal the truth, he willingly continues the countdown to save the humans. The monoliths engulf Jupiter, causing nuclear fusion that transforms the planet into a small star. The Discovery is consumed in the blast after the Leonov breaks away to safety. Just before the Discovery is engulfed, Bowman's voice is heard once again as he speaks to Hal and tells him that they will soon be together after he transmits a message to Earth. And this is what the message to Earth says. It says, all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace. The star's miraculous appearance inspires American and Soviet leaders to seek peace. Europa gradually transforms from an icy wasteland to a humid jungle covered with plant life. A monolith stands in the primeval European swamp waiting for intelligent life forms to evoke. So it started life all over again. And it says basically, it turned Jupiter into a mini star. Now, this has been in conspiracy circles for years. People talk about Project Lucifer, and, I don't know whether that's true, whether it isn't, but that the government wanted to do this, that they wanted to create nuclear fusion on Jupiter and create a tiny star out of it, making it, and basically that's what these monoliths did. And he says, all these worlds are yours except Europa. So a lot of the smaller moons around it became planets, right? All these worlds are yours except Europa. What worlds are they talking about? Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace. So this thing knew, humans would come and fuck it up. So back to this article, NASA just detected water vapor on Europa that could hold key to alien life. I saw this and was like, holy shit. I saw some other stuff too about Mars. I think there's been some secret terraforming going on, either by us or somebody else, or joint plans for many years. An icy moon of Jupiter is looking more and more like it could hold alien life deep in its subsurface sea. On Monday, NASA announced that scientists had officially measured water vapor on the moon called Europa for the first time. The discovery is yet another sign that Europa has all the ingredients for aliens. Given the right chemicals and a little deep sea volcanic activity, it's possible that life could spring up or already has there deep within the saltwater ocean. Here's why scientists are increasingly looking to Europa in their hunt for alien life. Essential chemical elements, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur, are sources of energy. 2 of the 3 requirements for life are found all over the solar system, but the third, liquid water, is somewhat hard to find beyond Earth. While scientists have not yet detected liquid water directly, we've found the next best thing, water in vapor form. Scientists have long speculated that Europa conceals in its ocean below its icy surface, possibly with twice the volume of Earth's oceans. I don't know. Something's weird about this. Don't you guys get that feeling? Am I the only one that feels like something's weird about this? And then the whole Arthur C. Clarke thing. In 2010, all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. I don't know. Something tells me maybe it's not a good idea we go fucking around with Europa. What do you think? Arthur C. Clarke definitely knew some shit, though, because when he died, I remember, it was probably about 10 years or so ago when he died. I remember I talked about it on my show even back then, that he insisted on there being no... Oh, here it is. It's right in front of me. A famous quotation of Clarke is often cited, quote, "One of the greatest tragedies of mankind is that mortality has been hijacked by religion." He was quoted in Popular Science in 2004 as saying of religion, quote, "Most malevolent and persistent of all mind viruses, we should get rid of it as quickly as you can." Yeah, you knew what the fuck he was talking about. Now, I agree with that. But my point is what evidence, what did he know, what information did he have access to that we don't have access to that made him so steadfast in that? In a 3-day dialogue on Man and His World with Alan Watts, Clarke stated that he was biased against religion and said that he could not forgive religions for what he perceived as their inability to prevent atrocities and wars over time. In his introduction to the penultimate episode of Mysterious World, entitled Strange Skies, Clarke said, quote, "I sometimes think that the universe is a machine designed for the perpetual astonishment of astronomers," reflecting the dialogue of the episode in which he stated this concept more broadly referring to mankind. Near the very end of that same episode, the last segment of which covered the Star of Bethlehem, he said that his favorite theory was that it might be a pulsar. Given that pulsars were discovered in the interval between his writing the short story The Star in 1955 and the making of Mysterious World in 1980, and given the more recent discovery of pulsar PSR B1913 plus 16, he said, quote, "How romantic if even now we can hear the dying voice of a star which heralded the Christian era." Clarke left written instructions for his funeral that stated absolutely no religious rites of any kind relating to any religious faith should be associated with my funeral. But yeah, there's tons of stuff. The guy was definitely in the know. But it's fascinating to see how, you know, we're being told that, oh yeah, these ideas started out as science fiction and then he created. No. No, it's all part of the smoke screen. But going back to 2010, A Space Odyssey, fascinating about that movie. There's a scene where you see Roy Scheider and he's like, I forget what it is. The whole spaceship is shaking. It's violently shaking. I think they're trying to do a dock or doing something, change in orbit but anyway, there's that Russian woman that he's like, you see him, he's like holding on to her. And she was in that movie. I never saw her in anything else. It's fascinating that she went on to be. Oh, this is this band that I was kind of into back in the 90s. They were called 11. And she went on to be like the keyboardist and vocalist in that. She went on to she wrote some songs with Chris Cornell. She was in Queens of the Stone Age too. For a long time. She died of cancer 10 or 11 years ago. But when you go read her story, it's just fascinating. It's just very interesting. And again, why they choose certain people over others to be in these roles and be in these movies. Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. Mysterious comet will cause a rare unicorn meteor storm this week. Here's how to watch. Uh-oh. Cue up the AC/DC, motherfuckers. Oh, some fucking Maximum Overdrive up in this bitch. Remember I talked about that video I made and talked about Maximum Overdrive? Remember what caused it? There was what basically causes all the all the events in the whole Stephen King universe. The fucking a UFO hidden behind a comet caused all the machines to go crazy. Unicorn meteor storm caused by a mysterious comet. Wow. I think you're supposed to be able to see that tonight, so you may want to go outside and look tonight. I won't be able to see shit because I live in a fucking city and it's all fucking blurred out by the lights. But, yeah, tonight, Thursday night, you might be able to see it. Not going to happen again until 2043, they say. Two meteor scientists, Peter Janeskins and Esko Lieutenant. Why do these people have to have the most fucked? Why is it when people are scientists, they have the most fucked up, almost unpronounceable names? I never understood that. Sure, you know what I'm saying? You never hear John Smith is never a fucking astrophysicist. Shared their prediction for an outburst by the Alpha Montasteroid meteor shower November 21st or 22nd, depending on your location. People to prepare to set your watch so you don't miss the potential for a very limited or rare dazzling display. I'm worried about the fucking, I'm worried about whether or not my fucking, turntable and fucking microphones are going to turn on me. And I got, shit, I'm going to put fucking Who Made Who on the turntable tonight. Crank that shit up. Let's see what else we got. I had one story yesterday that I didn't get to, so I want to make sure I get to that one tonight. Give me a second to find it. Last night I talked about the Club 33 at Disneyland, and I talked about one of the members of that, of course, being Tom Hanks. And I mentioned that I had another related Tom Hanks story for you. I don't want to make sure I get to that here tonight, but now I'm having trouble finding it, so just give me a second here. Okay, so about 10 or 11 years ago, I've seen like I've put this in one of my videos before. I don't know which ones. And I tried to find this clip recently, and most of it's been scrubbed off YouTube. You can find little pieces of it somewhere. But there was a CBS News report 10, 11, 12 years ago, 2008, 2009, something like that, maybe 2007, that showed all this genealogical stuff about, it really was the real proof of all the bloodline stuff. Everybody, people don't just become famous or become, famous movie stars and famous rock stars and everything else by accident. It's a part of these bloodlines where everybody's interrelated. And one of our listeners had a good question a couple of weeks ago. I ended up responding to him privately, but he kind of asked me, how do they decide which people become famous or well-known or whatever. And it's a great question because, as I was explaining to him, it's not a guarantee. You know, it's not just like, okay, this person's born. I mean, you have those cases where you have, you know, well-known families and, you know, they have established names, and then those people become famous too because they're established names. But it's not a guaranteed thing. Not every single person that is in these bloodlines, oftentimes they don't even know it. What ends up happening is that once they become established and known, their backgrounds are looked into, and then sometimes even unbeknownst to them, their careers can start to rise and rise and rise, and they think it's just a result of their own talent or whatever else. But really, it's because whoever, you know, the people that pull the strings and control things looked into it without their knowledge, and this is what causes their ascendancy. This is why Rogan got so scared and tried to change the subject very quickly and didn't say much about it when Kevin Smith brought up his relation to Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance. And Joe didn't want to talk about it and had never talked about it before. And so this was a question that one of the listeners had was, you know, how does that happen? How do they get chosen? Well, again, like I said, it goes back to the mafia thing. It's the same way they do it in the mafia. You can have guys that are in the mafia, right, for years, you know, foot soldiers, henchmen. Nobody's looking into their backgrounds. I'm talking specifically about the Italian mob. I don't know about other ones, but I'm sure it is probably that way in other ones too, but specifically in the Italian mob, I mean, you can be a foot soldier for 20, 30 years, you know, or whatever, a henchman, low-level guy. Nobody cares about your background. But then as soon as you want to go become a made man, they look into your background, and you have to trace all your lineage back to Sicily. And guess what? Joe Rogan and fucking Gerard Way both do. That's how they're related, because Joe's grandmother, his aunt, his great aunt, her children were the Ways. So again, it's not these guys don't get a fast track, you know, because that was one of the questions the listener had. Well, you know, Gerard Way or whatever, he wasn't successful for many years with his music and then became successful later on. Same way with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan wasn't successful for many years, but that's the thing. Once you climb up to a certain level, and I don't know at which point they do this, but you see it every time. But this CBS thing that came out 10, 11 years ago showed how Barack Obama and George Bush and Dick Cheney and all these people, famous movie stars and rock stars too, and Justin Timberlake and Princess Diana, all these people, they all trace their lineage back to Vlad the Impaler. I mean, they can go far in that, but they're all interconnected. They're all cousins, and Tom Hanks was on there, listed as one of those. And, you know, we talked about Tom Hanks being in the Club 33 yesterday. Now he's got this Mr. Rogers movie coming out. I got to be honest with you, I'm going to skip in this Mr. Rogers movie. I skip a fucking Tom Hanks movie about every 10 years or so. I remember fucking Sleepless in Seattle came out there, and I skipped that. Fucking You Got Mail, skipped that. Fucking, here's the one that blows everybody away. Never seen this movie, never will, never wanted to see it, never had any desire. And I can't believe it's been 20 years and I've been able to keep myself from never seeing this movie. I never want to see it because I don't want to fucking see that bullshit. I'm the only person left on the planet that never saw the movie Saving Private Ryan. Never watched it. Never had any desire. Like, I don't need to fucking watch a 3.5 hour movie to tell me war is fucking hell. I know it's fucking hell. I studied and researched this shit long before that movie came out. Fuck that shit. Didn't watch that. I'm not gonna watch his fucking psychological warfare. That's what it is. I don't know, dude. I just don't get into stuff like this where they intentionally want to tug at your heartstrings and make you emotional. You know, you can say it's not a bad thing, but I'm telling you, man, I just don't trust this kind of shit. And look, the documentary they made about it, okay, fine. And then you come out with a fucking movie, a live action movie about him with Tom Hanks playing him the next year. And it's all designed. Listen to this. Tom Hanks just found out he's related to Mr. Rogers. So what's that mean? That's the headline, but that's not the most important takeaway here. The most important takeaway here is that your boy, Mr. Wholesome, everybody for years said, oh, he was a sniper and all this shit. That was all bullshit. It was all made up rumor. The real story was now what we're finding out is Mr. Rogers was a bloodline. That's what you think none of these people get put on TV, folks, and get notoriety and get known if they're not connected to the family, to the bloodlines. Okay? I'm sorry to bust your bubble. People are going to hate me now. I can't believe you ruined Mr. Rogers for me. He's so wholesome and good. I'm going to go watch the Tom Hanks movie and cry. Oh, it's so wonderful. It's such a great movie. We hear the idiots gushing now. Fuck that. I'm not watching that fucking movie. And frankly, he seems creepy to me. And I watched the preview and he was kind of doing a Forrest Gump voice a little bit for Mr. Rogers. We're going to go see Mr. McFeely in Make Believe Land. That shit always kind of fucking turn me off to Mr. McFeely. I don't know about that. That always kind of bothers me a little bit. Mr. McFeely. I don't know if you could get away with that now. Could you get away with that? I don't think you get away with that in 2019, having a character named Mr. McFeely without people, looking for the white rape van out front or something. Yeah, so if Tom Hanks is related to Mr. Rogers, then that means that Mr. Rogers is also related to Vlad the Impaler, fucking Princess Diana, the Bushes, the Cheneys, Obama. Fucking A, man. Tom Hanks is getting into character to a whole new level. He's actually related to one. Hanks just found out Sunday that he's related to Fred Rogers, who played Mr. Rogers on the children's TV show. The two are cousins. Ancestry.com discovered it all comes together, you see. Right, and again, you see how they present this like, oh, we had no idea. Oh my goodness. It's just an accident. Oh, wow. Look at that. It was meant to be, wasn't it? Oh, well, Mr. Rogers, Tom Hanks played Mr. Rogers, and he's also related to him. Oh, my goodness. And this information comes out right as this movie's coming out, right? Right. It's a marketing. My God. And they want to act. This is the key essence of so many different topics of discussion, ladies and gentlemen, where they act like we never knew this. Ancestry.com just discovered this. Nobody ever knew this before. No, they didn't know this before they cast him to play this. They like to have their own people playing their own people, too. They like to have their bloodline people playing their own bloodline people. God, people hate my guts, man. I'm sorry, man. Don't shoot the messenger. I didn't fucking, I didn't come out with this stuff. People fucking hate me because I'll fucking ruin it. I ruin everything for everybody. Hey, if it makes you feel any better, I ruined a ton of shit for myself too. So, whatever you think I've ruined for you, believe me, I've ruined for myself as well. There's so many people that used to be my heroes that I can't even look at them now because I know what they are. Well, that's just an unbelievable story, though. And this whole thing where, we didn't know that. Oh, my goodness, look what we just discovered. Oh, it's so beautiful. He's portraying Mr. Rogers, and he's related to him. Oh. Life is like a Mr. McFeely. You never know what you're going to get up your butt. I swear to God, dude, I hope maybe they cut some of that out in the final product, but you watch that first trailer that came out, there's a couple of scenes in there where he was doing the I don't know, I know what love is, Jenny voice with Mr. Rogers. Like, come on, dude. I probably would have been, I think I probably might have liked this movie had they got anybody but Tom Hanks to do it. And I was scratching my head when I first heard about it. Why did they get Tom Hanks? And then now, of course, now we know. What's going on? Damn coons trying to get into school. Coons? Coons used to try to get off back porch. Mama just chased them off with a broom. Not raccoons, you moron. Niggers. life is like a Mr. McFeely. I mean, this is just fucking a par for the course, isn't it? I just love how they're, we just now found this out. Oh, no one knew about this until now. But yeah, when you look at all the other people, Vlad, you put all the, sorry I have to tell you folks, Mr. Rogers was in the bloodline. That's why he rose to prominence. Etc., etc., etc. Yeah, I know. You hate me. I ruin it all. Whatever. The documentary was great. You know, that's all we needed. We didn't need anything else past that. But even that was still... I don't know why. I don't know why they're so intent on trying to get us to be emotional about Mr. Rogers. There's something weird going on with it. I can't claim to know and have all the answers as to why it is, but there's something weird going on there. Here's another one. I mean, here's yet another story, folks. Right in line with what I've been telling you for years. I mean, this is pure gold. Exclusive, the godfather of tabloid. How childhood friend of Roy Cohn and the son of an influential political fixer with ties to Mussolini left the CIA to start the National Enquirer with a loan from mob boss Frank Costello. Wasn't Trump involved with National Enquirer too? Did you hear that? Let me read it for you again. How childhood friend of Roy Cohn and son of an influential political fixer with ties to Mussolini left the CIA to start the National Enquirer with a loan from mob boss Frank Costello. This is like everything I've been screaming about for years. Same thing with what I was talking about earlier with Elron. Elron was in the OSS, then the CIA. Takes the stuff that he learns from on assignment and the stuff from MK Ultra and the rest of that and incorporates it into and creates a religion out of it. Another young guy who was young at the time who was in the OSS at the same time as L. Ron Hubbard was. Sumner Redstone, Viacom. Now we know the National Enquirer. These were all CIA front companies that were started with mob money. This is fucking unbelievable. Sensational stories and outrageous headlines have been the National Enquirer's stock and trade for over 70 years. Flying saucer sightings, severed leg hops to hospital, Rita Hayworth back from the dead. It was the intoxicating brew of medical oddities, gore, and celebrity gossip that turned the supermarket scandal sheet into must-read mainstream entertainment. But now the National Enquirer has become its own greatest subject. The subject of a major new documentary and a forthcoming television series centered around one of America's most fascinating immigrant families, the Popes. It's the Godfather meets Citizen Kane, said Paul David Pope, whose father, Generoso Pope Jr., started the National Enquirer with a loan from his godfather, Frank Costello, the infamous prime minister of the underworld. Yeah, Frank Costello, if you know anything about organized crime and the history of that, it wasn't just some low-level guy, okay? And I love how they phrase, he left the CIA to start the National Enquirer. So that's how they all do that. He left the CIA, he left the OSS to do Scientology, or he left the OSS to start a media conglomerate that became Viacom. No, bullshit. That's the shill version of events. Those were still a part of their operations. Nobody leaves the agency, ladies and gentlemen. They simply go into a cover operation that looks like they have no connection to it. That's what Operation Mockingbird, all that stuff. I mean, this is unbelievable. I'm not going to read all this. They've got a documentary and a TV series coming out about it, then we'll find out more. But just the idea, again, all these major media outlets, religions, etc., cults, all the creation of people who, at one time or another, were in the employ of the intelligence agency. And again, once you're in, you don't get out. that's all I got for tonight, folks. Again, like I told you earlier in the show, I need your support. We need to see the needle move and get a good portion of that monthly goal whacked off of there tomorrow. 300 minimum is our goal by tomorrow, so please help us reach that so we can keep the lights on, keep the internet on, and all that. If you want to get questions in for my possible show for Dealey Plaza tomorrow, JFK-related questions, send them to globalrealityshow@gmail.com. Another thing I wanted to mention, some people say, oh, I get this all the time. I tried to donate, but it didn't work. So, I mean, listen, I know there's shit happens. Sometimes there's problems and hey, I get it, but I get this a lot. And I had one guy most recently, and I believe him because he said every time he goes to try and do something, they, because obviously they're fucking with me, and they've been fucking with me for years. But I just wanted to take the moment to say, don't let that stop you. If you're wanting to donate and you can't get to work, email me, globalrealityshow@gmail.com. I will find a solution that will enable you to contribute. I think we've still got the box sets on sale for $125 as well. Check the download shop link. You can find it in the link here at the comment section of the video and the read more section of the video. You can also find the contribution banner and all that stuff and the download shop information at our Facebook pages, at the Global Reality Radio Network Facebook page and the Josh Reeves Talk Show Host Explore page as well. I love you guys. We'll see you next time. Take care. Folks, this is Josh Reeves, and I'm here to tell you about a fantastic website, FixYourGut.com. FixYourGut.com can help you take control of your overall health. Are you sick and tired of suffering from indigestion, acid reflux, bloating, or abdominal pain? Do you run to the bathroom either all the time or hardly ever at all? Do you forget things often or have trouble concentrating? Are you depressed or anxious? Do you have IBD or SIBO? Digestive disorders are increasing in frequency because of our toxic-laden, fast-paced world. There are billions of microorganisms that live in your intestinal tract that have more to say about your health than almost anything else. Learn how to make sure your gut has more of the right organisms to improve your health and enhance your life. FixYourGut.com has over 200 free blog articles, and it's one of the most valuable resources on the planet to improve your overall health and well-being. Search either Fix Your Gut or We've Read the Documents on YouTube for the latest health and conspiracy information as well. You can also purchase John Brisson's book, Fix Your Gut, or get personal one-on-one health coaching to help get you back to living your life happy and healthy. Visit FixYourGut.com, the ultimate source for all things digestive health.